And now we are at part G for question 14, so the final leg of this question. All right, what the question is asking is a competing manufacturer says that not only 90% of their copiers will last at least 36 months. So I know after 36 months, so at 36 months, I know that 90% of my data, of my copiers, I should say, are still living. So it's asking what's the failure rate at 36 months. So if 90% are still living, 10% are dead at 36 months. All right, so let's try to figure out what that is in terms of 42 months. Well, it says 65% of my copiers are still living. So if we're chugging along and we get to 42 months, a little over half, 65% of my copiers are still living. Everything that came before that is what failed. So the area I'm looking for before that is going to be 100% minus 65%. I know that 35% of my copiers before that have failed. So once we're given the area, we can always inverse norm. So I'm going to inverse norm the 10% that failed to figure out a z-score, and it's going to spit out a negative 1.28. I'm also going to inverse norm my 42 months. So at 42 months, that's 35% of my copiers have failed, and it's going to spit out a z-score of negative 0.385. Alright, so I have my two z-scores for both of those, 36 months and 42 months. Now that still doesn't help us solve for our standard deviation or our mean that the problem is looking for. So this is very similar to that question we had on babies walking on question number 29 for chapter 6. If we're given a range, I can figure out, well, how much is in months is one standard deviation. Alright, so I'm given a range here. So my months are going to be 6 between my range here, right? So I've got 6 months between my two ranges. Now how much is the difference in my z-scores? If I take my z-scores and subtract them from each other, I'm going to get a difference of 0.895. So 6 months is equivalent to 0.895 standard deviations. Well, how do I get one standard deviation? I divide the two. So 6 divided by 0.895. It's going to give me 6.7 months for one standard deviation. So I know my standard deviation is 6.70 months, but I still don't know the mean from all this. Well, now that I've got my standard deviation and I've got z-scores, I can now use the z-score formula to figure out my mean. So what I have to do is go back to my z-scores. Well, I only need one z-score for this calculation, so I'm going to pick the first one that I have, negative 1.28. And I know that at negative 1.28, x is going to be the value of that z-score. So at negative 1.28, that was equivalent to 36 months minus the mean, which we don't know, divided by the standard deviation of 6.70 months that we just solved for. And if I do a little bit of algebra, I solve for mu, which is our mean, it's going to give me 44.6. So our mean in this case is at 44.6 months. Hope that this really helped you. Feel free to text me if you have any more questions. Um, don't hesitate to reach out to me even if it is pretty late tonight. Thanks.